Welcome to another video, and today we're going to be speaking about 5 crazy Formula 1 statistics, some of which you guys might not know about whatsoever. So let's get into this and start off with the first on my list, the 1997 European Grand Prix. So going into the final round of the 1997 Formula 1 season in Jerez, Spain, 2 drivers could become Formula 1 world champion. Jacques Villeneuve from Canada and Michael Schumacher from Germany. The latter led the championship by just 1 point, therefore just needing to stay ahead on track by the end of the Grand Prix on Sunday. However, this incredible statistic actually comes on Saturday in the qualifying session. 3 cars all setting exactly the same time. A 1:21.072. And this wasn't for 16th or for 8th, but for pole position. Both championship contenders, Schumacher and Villeneuve, alongside Heinz-Harald Frentzen and the other Williams, were the drivers that all set this exact time of a 1:21.072. So you might be thinking, who starts on pole position then? Well, it was actually Jacques Villeneuve, because he set the time first. Sometimes it is best to go out early in the session and get your lap time in, even though most of the time the faster times will be set right at the end. So Villeneuve would start on pole position, followed by Schumacher, and Frentzen would line up third. And what's often forgot about this qualifying session is that Damon Hill was 4th position on the grid, just 0.058 seconds back, and he was in the underperforming Arrows Yamaha. Just to put it into perspective, his teammate was 13th, 1.1 seconds slower than Damon Hill. It's crazy in an environment which is as precise as Formula 1 that 3 drivers could set identical times. Of course, it does happen in today's F1. In fact, it's already happened in 2020. 3 drivers tying for pole position, however, is something we're very unlikely to relive. So, quite an exciting statistic in Formula 1 history. If you haven't gone and watched the 1997 season finale, I would definitely advise you go and do so. But I'm going to spoil the result for the sake of this video. Villeneuve would win the championship after Schumacher would make contact with him on Sunday. He'd be disqualified from the race and the championship for it. Interesting side note, Häkkinen won his first Grand Prix in Jerez that day because of the contact. Second place also gave David Coulthard 3rd place in the standings after Schumacher's disqualification. Funnily enough, another strange statistic on that day is that Schumacher and Villeneuve never actually shared a podium throughout the 1997 season, despite their championship battle going down to the wire. Next, let's head to the 1963 Belgian Grand Prix. So we're heading back in time nearly 60 years to an era of Formula 1 which is known as much for the great winners as for the drivers that were lost behind the wheel. The Belgian Grand Prix was the second round of the season in 1963, and the championship leader was Graham Hill, who had won the first round of the season in Monaco. He had won that race in the BRM, but it also looked like the Lotus was a pretty decent car, and one driver behind the wheel of one of those Lotuses, Jim Clark. However, it would be Hill that would qualify on pole position in 1963's Belgian Grand Prix. The Spa-Francorchamps circuit in that era was 14.1 kilometers long, and Jim Clark in his Lotus was 8th, 3 seconds back on Hill's time. The 20-car field was actually spread by nearly 40 seconds, with the Italian driver Giancarlo Baghetti, probably pronounced wrong, 39.5 seconds off the eventual pole time. Jim Clark must have had one of the best starts in Formula 1 history, as he went from 8th to lead into Eau Rouge. Clark would be relentless, and even though parts of the track were damp, others dry, he would keep his car on the track and extend his lead lap after lap. By about the 1/3 race distance mark, Clark was leading Hill by over 15 seconds and looked on course to take another win, and amazingly on lap 16 he put in the fastest lap of the race at 3:58.1, only 1 second off his qualifying time. And shortly afterwards the clouds burst and rain poured onto the track, so no chance for his fastest lap to be beaten then. So after this the track was soaked, but Clark was flying. Hill ground to a halt with a gearbox failure on lap number 17, and nearly 1/4 of the field had accidents while the track was soaked. More retired with car issues at the time as well. However, this is not to take away from Clark's performance. He was still driving the near perfect race at the front of the field. He was apparently lapping 20 seconds a lap faster than the majority of his competitors around him. In the rain, he pulled out a huge margin and lapped everyone up to 3rd place. The only person spared of being lapped was Bruce McLaren in his Cooper. They had actually debated about stopping the race early because of the miserable conditions, but this didn't materialise. So the race went ahead full distance. Clark won by 4 minutes and 54 seconds. Everyone else was a lap down at least, except from 2nd place. 8 cars were classified in one of the trickiest races in the history of Formula 1. It's not the biggest winning margin in terms of laps, but that's because the track was much longer than the majority of the others on the calendar, so unfortunately this isn't a record in itself. If it were Silverstone, for example, Clark would have won by over 3 laps, to put that into perspective, and that would be a record in terms of laps. But the incredible margin of victory whilst being on the same lap is an incredible statistic in itself. Over 4 minutes, nearly 5 ahead of everyone else, is quite incredible. Teo Fabi started 64 Formula 1 races. In those, he scored multiple podiums for Tolman, Brabham and Benetton. He had success before making it to Formula 1. In 1980, for example, he won 3 races on course to 3rd place in Formula 2, finishing behind Brian Henton and Derek Warwick, the latter being a Le Mans winner in 1992. He also qualified on pole position for the 1983 Indy 500 and had finished 2nd position in that championship at the end of the year. Teo Fabi was quick, and he proved that in F1 when in 1985 he took pole position at the German Grand Prix by nearly 1.2 seconds. That was ahead of the likes of Senna, Prost, Lauda and many more great names. He would go on to retire on lap 29, but the F1 paddock realised that Teo had the talent to go far in the sport after that day. However, Teo's 1985 season didn't exactly go to plan. Plagued with an unreliable car and one that wasn't especially fast, he'd go on to finish the season with 0 points, finishing only 2 races, the best of which was 12th in Italy. 1986 would be more promising, if only slightly. He would claim 2 more pole positions, back to back in fact, at the Austrian and Italian Grand Prix. However, Teo would retire from both of these, only scoring 2 points over the whole season, all of those points coming with a 5th place finish in Spain earlier on in the year. Teo's last season in Formula 1 was probably his best. In 1987, he was continuing on with the Benetton team, which had joined in 1986. It was a much better year for him, with a podium, 9th place overall in the standings, but it wasn't enough to prolong his career in Formula 1, and he rejoined the kart series in 1988, which he nearly won in 1983. So you're probably wondering, where is the incredible statistic here? Well, it's actually the fact that Teo had 3 pole positions in Formula 1, but never actually led a race. In fact, he spent 56 laps in 2nd place. Whatever you may think, after having 3 pole positions, you'd hope at least one of them was enough to at least lead 1 lap. Unfortunately for Teo, that never happened. From my recollection at least, the 2011 European Grand Prix wasn't an especially amazing race, but it does show an amazing feat in Formula 1 history, one in which all 24 cars that entered the Grand Prix finished. Not just the fact that all cars finished, but the fact that it was 24 means it's an F1 record. And with current grids of 20, doesn't look like that's going to be beaten anytime soon. So who was the unlucky man to finish 24th on this occasion? Well, you might have guessed this already. Mr. Narain Karthikeyan, who has a total of 5 points to his name throughout his Formula 1 career. Yeah, those points came in the United States Grand Prix 2005. To be fair to him, the HRT that he was driving in 2011 was woeful, as were the Virgin and Lotus cars at the back of the grid with him. However, Lotus had made gains and actually weren't too far off the rest of the pack, but still, it was enough to see them significantly distanced. On Saturday, Narain qualified last with a 1:44.363. To put that into perspective, Sebastian Vettel's pole time on that day was a 1:36.975. So, nearly 8 seconds slower. Narain was also 0.8 seconds slower than teammate Liuzzi and nearly 3 seconds slower than Lotus's Heikki Kovalainen. Remember, those back 3 teams were quite distanced in the 2010 to 2013 era. Unfortunately for Narain, he'd finished the race 3 laps down, as would teammate Tonio Liuzzi. He also recorded the lowest finishing position in Formula 1 history of 24th. And like with the other statistic, with the way Formula 1 is right now, 20 cars on the grid, possibly 22 in the near future, it seems that the record of 24th is probably not going to be going away from the reign anytime soon. I also found in contrast an interesting statistic about the lowest number of finishes in a race. The 1996 Monaco Grand Prix, only 3 cars crossed the line. 7 were classified, and that was obviously the race where Olivier Panis scored his only F1 victory, in a Ligier no less. Finally, I want to speak about Martin Brundle. For many, Martin Brundle is the Murray Walker of our generation, in the way that he's a true gem in the commentary box, but equally he was as quick out on track. He had a Formula 1 career spanning from 1984 to 1996, driving for a wide range of teams in terms of performance and skill level. He drove for McLaren and Benetton, for example, top teams at their time, but also for struggling teams, for Brabham, the Zakspeed as examples. In all, he finished on the podium 9 times and started 158 Grand Prix. So the crazy statistic here is he is the driver with the most starts without a fastest lap. It's not a statistic that you'd particularly want, but it does show that teams in the paddock knew he was a very quick driver, but unfortunately for him, the luck and the judgment didn't align to secure a fastest lap. And to put it in perspective, lots of random drivers have got fastest laps over the years. Danny Kvyat got one in a Toro Rosso in Spain in 2016, and Esteban Gutierrez has got a fastest lap as well whilst in an uncompetitive Sauber. Random fastest laps do happen, and especially nowadays when you can bolt on a set of soft tyres and go for a fast lap right near the end of the race, it means that random drivers can score fastest laps. We can even look in 2020 as an example that both McLaren drivers in the first 2 races of the season secured fastest laps by bolting on new tyres near the end of the race. Martin Brundle was also not too far off Italian Andrea De Cesaris' record of 208 starts without a victory as well. Brundle is 6th place on that list, behind current drivers Perez and Grosjean, 182 and 169 Grand Prix respectively. Brundle did have the car, possibly to win races. And if you go and listen to his podcasts on the Formula 1 official channel as well as others on YouTube, you can hear him recall the 1992 Belgian Grand Prix, for example, in which he got very unlucky and teammate Schumacher would get the win instead of him. If I look through his career in Formula 1, I'd say 1992 to 1994 would have been Brundle's best opportunity to get this fastest lap. He also never got a pole position and obviously never got a win either, so maybe a feat possibly he could have achieved in this season, but for a number of reasons this didn't happen. For example, in 1992 he drove for Benetton. Schumacher obviously won the Belgian Grand Prix as we've mentioned, but apart from that, Williams was so dominant in 1992, possibly it was unlikely he was going to score any of those feats outside of that. In 1993 he drove for Ligier. You might think, okay, he's never going to score anything there, but to be fair, he scored a podium and some decent finishes there, and 7th overall in the standings, but once again, a dominant car that season. The Williams in 1993 was way above the rest. It was unlikely he was going to score a victory unless there was a big DNF there, or his fastest lap or pole position. In 1994 he finished 7th place in the championship once again, this time driving for the McLaren team, and he scored 2 podiums, but yet again there was a dominant car. This time it was the Benetton of Michael Schumacher. So while it is unfortunate to have the statistic for the most amount of races without a fastest lap, he has had a great driving career, and one just as influential off the track as well since he stopped driving. His commentary has been iconic through my childhood, for example, and has always been one of the main reasons why I still tune in to this day. He and James Allen, for example, were an iconic duo. You've got to say it's great that ITV Sport paired them up together because they were a great TV duo together, and I really enjoyed their commentary together, and it was definitely iconic as a young fan growing up watching the world of Formula 1. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you to all of the new subscribers over the last couple of days as well. I think they've come from the Lando Norris video, which has peaked up again over the last couple of days. So massive thank you to everyone who tuned into that. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It seems like some of you did at least. So thanks again. Have a great weekend and enjoy the racing that will be on this weekend, even though we have no Formula 1. We'll be back soon. Triple header coming up, which is going to be quite exciting. 2 races at Britain and then also another one after that. Is it Spain? I think it's Spain. Possibly it's Spain. Yeah, Spain. Okay, Guys, have a great weekend. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.